Hello, my name is Jill Kunsmann, and I am with the Western Great Lakes Bird and Bat Observatory. I have been a lifelong gardener, and part of what I have found most fulfilling in my gardening is the fact that it attracts so many birds and beautiful butterflies and lots of different pollinators. Today I'd like to take you on a little tour of my gardens and share some of the tips in terms of how to attract these wonderful creatures, and in particular the monarch butterfly, which is something I've been really interested in over the last several years as we understand more about how vulnerable this iconic insect is. So I hope you enjoy this video. If you have any questions, please contact us. I have given an email address at the end of this video. Thank you so much for joining us today. Grouping and mingling are two important concepts when you're considering gardening for butterflies and other pollinators. The idea of grouping is to plant a broad mass of a particularly favorite nectar plant that pollinators can see when they're flying from overhead. You can imagine that a big splash of color is going to be more attention-grabbing than just one or two isolated plants. The mingling part of this concept of grouping and mingling comes when you take host plants that are really important to monarch butterflies. That's the only plant that they can lay their eggs on that the monarch caterpillars will feed on. So by grouping large swaths of, this happens to be purple sage, along with a grouping of common milkweed, you easily attract monarchs who will then lay their eggs. When the caterpillars emerge from their chrysalis, they will then immediately have a good nectar plant nearby to feed on. So this is the grouping and mingling. You can see a little bit before we had some monarchs flitting around in here. You can see the milkweed bugs are busy on this particular milkweed plant as well. I'm going to give one more view of what the concept of grouping and mingling does. You can see large areas of purple here, which is a color that really attracts pollinators. You can see one yellow blossom in the middle of the flower bed that is closest to me. Pretty soon this will be a mass of yellow. That is the lance-leafed coreopsis, and this is something that the bumblebees absolutely adore. They haven't discovered this blossom yet, but I have filmed bees that are basically rolling in the pollen in this plant. Try to aim for continuous bloom in your gardens. Right now we're in mid-June, so this is what this garden looks like at this time of year. But earlier in the spring it was filled with daffodils and Siberian squill, which attract the painted ladies. And also the early arriving hummingbirds seem to like the small narcissus. In June, this garden then has the primrose, the blue salvia. It has penstemon, which is a native plant, and a number of other plants that are good nectar plants. Interspersed also in this garden are there are a lot of annual plants and nectar plants that you can put in a garden, but you want to make sure that you also have a good abundance of milkweed. So in this same garden, you can see here a fairly large patch of what we call Asclepias tuberosa. It's the butterfly weed, which comes in either orange or yellow. This happens to be orange. And this will be a really good front of the border plant if you have a little bit more of a formal garden. But later on there'll be coneflowers and asters and coneflowers. As I said coneflowers already. Coneflowers and Goldstrom, which is the black-eyed Susan. One thing to certainly consider if you are gardening for pollinators is how to treat your lawn. I know that we're conditioned to want golf course green lawns, and the only way that we will ever achieve those kinds of lawns is by applying copious amounts of insecticide, pesticide, fertilizers, water. All of those are not particularly good for the environment. But if you allow Dutch white clover to take over your lawn, it blooms. It's actually, I think, rather attractive. It puts nitrogen back into the soil. It becomes an amazing food source for all sorts of bees and also rabbits, which will keep the rabbits out of your garden if that's an objective you have. But I definitely encourage you to consider incorporating Dutch white clover into your lawn, and consider an equal opportunity lawn is the right way to go. If you are a purist and you want to plant only native plants, that's certainly also applicable to yards. You can have one garden that is all native plants, and then you can have a mixed bed. This particular garden has only native plants in it. Over here, none of them are in bloom right now, so probably we'll film this a bit later in the summer when they are in bloom. Right here in front of us, we have rosin plant, which is a tall yellow plant. We also have over here the taller, skinnier plant is ironweed. Also grows to be about 6 to 7 feet with a beautiful purple flower that is an incredible butterfly magnet. Here in front of me is Ohio goldenrod, which is not the invasive kind of goldenrod that Canadian goldenrod is. A small colony started here of forked aster, which is one of the aster plants that, although it's not listed as endangered, on the list of 1 to 10, 10 being the most vulnerable, this ranks, I think, about a 7. Then over here, more Ohio goldenrod. We have here another wonderful magnet for butterflies, and a beloved plant in the fall for finches. This is purple hyssop. And then one of my favorite plants for butterflies is joe pye weed. So I have quite a bit of joe pye weed all over the garden. And then more lance leaf, forked aster. And then this here is lance leaf coreopsis. This will be blooming soon. So we'll circle back and give another film when the gardens are a little bit more colorful. Butterflies need warmth in order to be able to fly. And so providing basking sites in our garden is a really easy way to give them a place where they can settle in and warm up. So I have some black stones that I have laid out here. When it rains, these stones collect a puddle, which the butterflies also seem to really enjoy. And it's flanked here by woolly thyme, which again it's not a native plant, but it is a beloved nectar plant of bees. When the sun hits this area, it absolutely vibrates. In summary, plant lots of milkweed, plant lots of native plants, intermingle some good nectar annual plants in your garden, and then group your plants 3 to 5 in a planting area, mingled with plenty of host plants, milkweed plants, and then make sure that you have basking sites where the butterflies can warm themselves, perhaps some small puddled areas where they can drink. And lastly, do not use insecticides or pesticides. These are absolutely lethal. Even using something like deer off can create a real tragedy in monarch populations. So be careful of what you spray in your yard. I hope this helps you. If you have any questions, you can contact us at info@wglbbo.org.